The morning light struggled to filter through the heavy, dusty damask curtains in the master bedchamber of Montfort Manor. It cast long, oppressive shadows across the figure of Lady Amelia Blackwood Montfort as she prepared yet another dose of laudanum. Her hands, which had long ago ceased trembling from exhaustion, moved with the mechanical precision of a woman who had forgotten the sensation of rest. At 32 years of age, she looked a decade older. Her once luminous complexion was now pale and drawn, the skin beneath her eyes bruised with fatigue, her slender frame worn thin by 9 years of sleepless nights and relentless, crushing duty. The air in the room was thick, smelling of stale lavender, sickness, and the cloying sweetness of the medicinal syrups that cluttered the bedside table. It was a smell that clung to Amelia's clothes, to her hair, and to her very skin, marking her as a prisoner of this room just as surely as shackles might have done. The man in the bed, Baron Cedric Montfort, stirred with a groan that Amelia had learned to interpret with the precision of a seasoned physician. She froze, the glass vial hovering over the spoon. She listened. If the groan was too loud, it signaled genuine discomfort, rare as that was. If it was too soft, it was a prelude to a complaint about her lack of attention. This groan fell somewhere between the two, a specific pitch of petulance which meant she had perhaps 5 minutes before the criticism would begin. She had not always lived this way. There had been a time, impossibly distant now, when she had been happy. If stories of resilience and quiet courage in the face of impossible circumstances touch your heart, please subscribe and join us on this journey. You will not want to miss what happens next. The transformation had not occurred overnight, though looking back, Amelia could scarcely remember the woman she had been before illness became the tyrant of their household. She had married Cedric Montfort in the summer of 1809 at the age of 19, a love match that society had envied. He had been handsome, charming, and attentive in ways that made her heart race. Their first years together had been filled with laughter, with long walks through the estate gardens where he would pick wildflowers for her hair, and with whispered confidences in the darkness of their shared bedchamber. They had been blessed early. Edward had arrived first, a serious and watchful babe. Sophie followed, bringing light and color. And then James, born in 1812, completing their family. They were the picture of a perfect Regency family, their future unspooling before them like a golden ribbon. Then, in the autumn of 1813, everything changed. The illness had begun innocuously enough. It started with fatigue that Cedric could not shake, a lethargy that kept him from the hunt, then from the table. This was followed by mysterious pains that seemed to migrate through his body with no discernible pattern. One day it was his joints, the next his stomach, the next a blinding headache that required absolute silence in the house. Doctor after doctor had been summoned from the county. Each offered theories that ranged from consumption to gout to some exotic tropical fever, though Cedric had never traveled beyond England's shores. They prescribed tonics, bleedings, and rest. Nothing helped. The treatments were as varied as they were ineffective. Amelia, desperate and terrified of losing the love of her life, had begged him to go to London. "We must see a specialist, Cedric," she had pleaded in that first year, kneeling by his bedside. "Sir Henry Halford attends the king. Surely he could uncover the cause." But Cedric had flown into a panic, his breathing becoming ragged, his face flushing with distress. "The journey would kill me, Amelia. Do you not see how the carriage vibration shatters my nerves? And to have a stranger poke and prod me? No, it would be the death of me. I am safe only here, with you." And so they remained isolated, trapped in a cycle of local remedies and escalating complaints. And Amelia, dutiful wife that she was, had transformed herself into his constant nurse, his shield, and his servant. "The medicine, Amelia," Cedric's voice cut through her reverie, sharp despite his supposed weakness. "I have been suffering here while you stand there wool-gathering. Do you find pleasure in watching me endure such agony?" She moved swiftly to his bedside. the familiar weight of guilt settling across her shoulders like a sodden cloak. "Forgive me, my lord. I was ensuring the proper dosage." "The proper dosage," he repeated, his tone dripping with disdain. "After 9 years, one would think you might have mastered such a simple task. Yet here I am, still suffering from your endless incompetence." Amelia held the glass to his lips, supporting his head with practiced care. He took the liquid into his mouth, held it for a moment, and then swallowed with a grimace of theatrical proportions. Or at least, she assumed he swallowed. He always demanded water immediately after to wash away the taste. "Too bitter," he declared, reaching for the water glass she offered. "You have mixed it incorrectly again. Honestly, Amelia, even the simplest preparations defeat you." "I mixed it exactly as Dr. Shaw prescribed," she said quietly, the words automatic now, drained of any defensive heat they might once have carried. "Dr. Shaw," Cedric scoffed, sinking back against his pillows with a performance of exhaustion that had become as familiar to Amelia as her own reflection. "That man is a quack. I have told you repeatedly that his treatments worsen my condition, yet you insist on following his incompetent guidance. Sometimes I wonder if you wish me dead." The accusation landed with its intended effect. Amelia felt the familiar twist of her stomach, the tightening in her chest that accompanied such statements. 9 years had not inured her to the pain of being accused of cruelty when she had sacrificed everything, her youth, her beauty, her friends, her relationship with her children, to care for him. "I would never wish such a thing," she whispered. "Would you not?" Cedric's eyes, still sharp and calculating despite his supposed debilitation, fixed upon her. "You sigh when you enter this room, Amelia. You can barely conceal your resentment at being bound to a dying man. What kind of wife begrudges her husband the very care that might keep him alive?" "I do not begrudge you," she said. A knock at the door provided momentary reprieve. The housekeeper, Mrs. Daventry, entered with a breakfast tray, her expression carefully neutral, in that way servants adopted when they witnessed too much but could say nothing. "Your breakfast, my lord," Mrs. Daventry said, setting the tray on the bedside table. Cedric examined the offerings with the intensity of a general surveying enemy positions. "Porridge again? My dear Mrs. Daventry, surely you understand that my delicate constitution requires more substantial nourishment. This thin gruel is an insult." "Dr. Shaw recommended easily digestible foods, my lord," the housekeeper replied smoothly. "He fears that heavier meats would tax your system." "Dr. Shaw," Cedric repeated with bitter emphasis. "That charlatan understands nothing of my suffering. Remove this slop and bring me a proper breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast with butter, and ham. If I am to waste away, let it not be from deliberate starvation by my own household." Mrs. Daventry glanced at Amelia, who gave a small, weary nod of permission. It was easier to yield than to argue. The housekeeper withdrew, taking the offending porridge with her. When they were alone again, Cedric turned his attention back to his wife. "You see how I am treated in my own home, like an invalid to be managed rather than the master who provides the very roof over your ungrateful heads." Amelia said nothing. There was nothing to say that had not been said 1,000 times before. The morning proceeded as mornings had proceeded for 9 years. Cedric alternated between bouts of vocal suffering and periods of accusatory silence. Amelia attended to his needs with mechanical efficiency, her thoughts retreating to that safe, distant place where emotions could not reach her. She had learned this trick in the 3rd year, when the constant barrage of criticism had threatened to shatter her entirely. By removing herself mentally while performing her duties physically, she could endure. The children were not permitted to visit their father's sick room. Edward, now 12, Sophie 11, and young James, now 10, had grown up largely in the care of their governess, Miss Fletcher. All 3 had been born before the darkness descended upon the house. Cedric claimed their childish energy disturbed his delicate rest. Amelia suspected the truth was simpler. He preferred to maintain the fiction of his suffering without the complication of young eyes that might see through the performance. Just last week, James had stood at the door, clutching a toy soldier, asking to show Papa. Amelia had been forced to turn him away, seeing the light in his eyes dim as she explained, yet again, that Papa was too weak for visitors. The memory of her son's rejection stung more than any of Cedric's insults. It was mid-morning when Dr. Julian Shaw arrived for his weekly examination. At 36 years of age, Shaw had been attending the Baron for the full 9 years of his mysterious ailment. If Amelia had been capable of noticing such things through her fog of exhaustion, she might have observed that the physician's visits had grown longer of late. His questions had become more pointed, his examination of his patient more thorough and somehow more skeptical. "Good morning, Lady Montfort," Shaw said, as she admitted him to the sick room. He placed his bag on the table, his eyes scanning the room, lingering for a moment on the potted fern by the bedside table, which looked strangely withered. "How does the Baron fare today?" "As always," she replied, the automatic response carrying 9 years of weariness. "He complains the laudanum is too bitter, the porridge insufficient, and my care inadequate." Something flickered in Shaw's eyes, gone too quickly for her to interpret. "I see. And you, my lady? How do you fare?" The question caught her off guard. In 9 years, no one had asked how she was managing. "I am well enough, Dr. Shaw." "You are pale," he observed, his voice low. "When did you last take air outside this house? Truly take air, not merely stepping onto the terrace." Amelia tried to remember and could not. "I cannot leave him for long. He becomes distressed." "Does he?" It was not quite a question, and the tone carried something Amelia could not quite identify. A hardness. Cedric's voice rose from the bed, petulant and commanding. "Shaw, are you going to stand there gossiping with my wife all morning, or will you attend to your actual patient? I have been in agony since dawn, no thanks to Amelia's bungling of my medication." Shaw approached the bed with professional courtesy that concealed, Amelia would later learn, a growing contempt. "Let me examine you, my lord." The examination proceeded as they always did. Shaw tested Cedric's pulse, examined his eyes and tongue, and palpated his abdomen. Cedric maintained a running commentary on his symptoms and suffering. "The pain is worse in my legs today," the Baron announced. "A burning sensation that shoots from hip to ankle. I cannot move them, Shaw. They are dead weight, and my stomach is in turmoil. Whatever concoction you prescribed has made everything worse." Shaw pulled back the covers to examine Cedric's legs. He pressed his fingers into the calf muscle, feeling the resistance, the density of the flesh. He made a note in his leather journal, his expression unreadable. "I prescribed nothing new, my lord. You are receiving the same treatment as last month." "Then perhaps that is the problem," Cedric snapped. 9 years of the same ineffective remedies while I waste away. One might think you enjoy keeping me ill to ensure your continued employment." "One might think many things," Shaw said quietly, closing his journal with a definitive snap. "I will review my notes and consider whether any adjustments to your treatment might be beneficial." When the examination concluded, Shaw requested a private word with Lady Montfort. They stepped into the hallway, and Amelia was surprised when the physician insisted they meet properly, away from the prying ears of the manor. "I must speak with you on a matter of some urgency regarding your husband's regimen," Shaw said, his voice low and urgent. "Would you meet me in the parish library this afternoon? The vicar is absent, and it will provide the necessary discretion. It is not proper for a lady to be seen in the village alone, but the library is sanctuary." "The library?" Amelia hesitated. "I have not left the grounds in years. Cedric will be furious." "Please, Lady Montfort, it is imperative. It concerns his survival." She agreed, driven by a flicker of fear for Cedric's health. The short carriage ride to the village felt like a journey to a foreign land. The world outside the manor was shockingly bright, the air crisp and smelling of spring earth. It felt alien to her senses. The parish library was quiet, smelling of dust and old paper. Shafts of sunlight pierced the gloom, illuminating dancing motes of dust. Amelia sat in a secluded alcove, her hands folded in her lap, anxiety making her stomach turn. "You wish to discuss my husband's condition," she prompted when Shaw arrived. He looked grim, his jaw set in a line of determination. Shaw looked at her with an expression that mixed pity, anger, and something else she could not identify. In his hands, he held his medical journal, the leather cover worn from 9 years of constant use. "Lady Montfort," he began, then stopped, seeming to gather himself. "What I am about to tell you violates every principle of medical ethics I have been taught. I could be struck from practice for this disclosure, but I have wrestled with my conscience for months now, and I can no longer remain silent while I watch what is happening to you." Fear gripped her. "Is Cedric worse? Is he dying? Is that why you brought me here?" "No." The single word fell like a stone into still water. "That is precisely the problem, my lady. Your husband is not dying. In fact, your husband is not ill at all. He has not been ill for approximately 18 months, and I suspect he recovered years before that." The words made no sense. They were foreign sounds that refused to assemble into meaning. Amelia stared at the physician as though he had begun speaking in tongues. "I do not understand. I see his suffering daily. The pain, the weakness, the symptoms." "The performance," Shaw interrupted gently but firmly. "Lady Montfort, I have spent the last 6 months gathering irrefutable proof because I knew you would struggle to believe me. I could not speak until I was certain." "Proof?" she whispered. "What proof?" "Observe," Shaw said, opening his journal and pushing it across the table. "His muscle tone. A man bedridden for 9 years would have atrophied legs, withered and weak. Yet your husband's calves are as firm as a man who walks daily. I have noted this in my examinations. I have tested his reflexes. They are sharp, not sluggish." "Perhaps he is simply resilient." Amelia grasped at straws, her mind reeling. "And the laudanum," Shaw continued relentlessly. "He complains constantly of the bitterness, does he not? He demands water immediately. Have you never wondered why the potted fern by his bedside dies so frequently and must be replaced? I examined the soil of the last one Mrs. Daventry discarded. It was saturated with opium. He does not drink the medicine, Lady Montfort. He holds it in his mouth and spits it out the moment you turn away to fetch his water." Amelia's hands trembled violently. "But why?" "Because if he drank the amount you administer daily, he would be dead or a helpless addict," Shaw said. "He is neither. He is clear-eyed, sharp-tongued, and fully alert. He needs his wits to maintain the charade." "I cannot believe this," she whispered. 9 years. 9 years. "There is more," Shaw said, his voice dropping. "Last week, when I claimed to have left the manor but returned to retrieve my forgotten gloves, I looked through the crack in the door. I saw your husband standing by the window. He was eating a roasted capon leg he must have had smuggled in by a bribed footman. He was moving with perfect ease, Lady Montfort. He even stretched, touching his toes. The moment he heard your step in the hall, he threw the bones into the fire and collapsed into bed, summoning a groan." "No," Amelia whispered, though she did not know if she was denying his words or the implications of them. "Why would he do such a thing? Why would he imprison himself?" "Control," Shaw said simply. "Your husband discovered, whether consciously or unconsciously, that illness gave him complete power over your life. Your time, your attention, your entire existence revolves around his supposed suffering. He is the sun, and you are the planet trapped in his orbit. Why would he relinquish such total authority?" The library seemed to tilt around her. 9 years. 9 years of sleepless nights, of guilt, of erasing herself to become nothing more than a vessel for his care. 9 years of accusations that she was inadequate, incompetent, cruel for showing the slightest sign of fatigue or frustration. 9 years of lies. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Why did you not speak sooner? Because I tried to confront him privately first, Shaw admitted, looking pained. I told him I knew. I gave him the chance to confess to you himself. He laughed, Lady Montfort. He told me that if I spoke a word, he would ruin me. He said no one would believe a country doctor over a baron. He threatened to sue me for malpractice, to claim I was the one who was incompetent and see me destitute. That is why I waited. I needed to be certain I could prove it to you before I risked everything. Amelia felt as though she were drowning, being pulled under by waves of revelation. If this was true, if Cedric had been lying, then what did that mean for the last decade? Had any of it been real? Had she wasted nearly a decade of her life on an elaborate deception? He threatened you. He did. But I cannot watch him destroy you further, Shaw said with quiet intensity. Because you deserve to know the truth. Because what is happening to you is unconscionable, and my silence would make me complicit in it. He leaned back, his expression troubled. What you choose to do with this information is entirely your decision, Lady Montfort. I have given you the truth. How you wield it is your right alone. Amelia sat in stunned silence, her mind racing through 9 years of memories, examining each one through this new, devastating lens. The time she had attempted to attend a local assembly, and Cedric had suffered a dramatic collapse that sent her rushing home in tears of guilt. The friends who had gradually stopped calling because her husband's illness made visits impossible. The slow erosion of her identity until she existed only as an extension of his supposed suffering. I need to think, Amelia said, rising from her chair with movements that felt disconnected from her body. I need time to process this. Of course. Shaw stood as well, gathering his documents. Lady Montfort, be careful. Men who have tasted absolute power rarely relinquish it willingly. He will deny, he will rage, he will do everything in his considerable arsenal to make you doubt your own perceptions. Rage, pure and molten, surged through Amelia's chest. Not the cold anger she had occasionally felt at her circumstances, but a white-hot fury at the calculated cruelty of it all. He will find, she said, her voice steady despite the shaking of her hands, that I am not the same woman he married. Shaw nodded, something like relief crossing his features. I had hoped you would say that. Lady Montfort, if you need anything, testimony, documentation, support of any kind, you need only ask. Amelia returned to Montfort Manor in a daze, moving through the familiar rooms with new eyes. Everything appeared the same, yet everything had changed. The house that had been her prison for 9 years now revealed itself as simply a house, its bars forged not of stone, but of lies and manipulation. She went through the motions of dinner preparation in Cedric's room, listening to his usual complaints with ears that now heard the performance beneath the words. This broth is too hot, he declared, pushing the bowl away petulantly. Honestly, Amelia, after 9 years, can you not manage the simple task of bringing me a meal at the proper temperature? Your carelessness in even the smallest matters suggests a fundamental disrespect for my suffering. She said nothing, merely observing him with the same clinical detachment Dr. Shaw must have employed. The flush of his skin spoke of health, not fever. The strength with which he pushed the bowl suggested vigor, not weakness. And the gleam in his eyes as he watched for her reaction revealed the truth she had been too conditioned to see. He enjoyed this. The guilt he inflicted, the power he wielded, the complete control he exercised over her life. He reveled in it. Are you listening to me? Cedric demanded, or have you finally descended into complete incompetence? I am listening, Amelia replied, her tone neutral. Something in her voice must have registered, because Cedric's eyes narrowed. What has gotten into you? You seem strangely distant this evening. I am tired, she said, which was true. She was tired in ways that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion, and everything to do with 9 years of being made to feel small and inadequate and cruel for the simple crime of being human. Tired, Cedric scoffed. You are tired. Imagine how I feel, wasting away in this bed while you complain of fatigue from the minimal duties required of you. I am the one dying, Amelia. I am the one who suffers. Your exhaustion is an insult to my genuine agony." "Yes," she said softly. "I imagine it must be exhausting to maintain such an elaborate pretense." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Cedric's face went very still. The air in the room seemed to freeze. "What did you say?" Amelia felt a reckless courage rising in her chest, buoyed by months and years of suppressed rage finally finding voice. "I said it must be exhausting, all that performing, all that careful maintenance of suffering, making sure to groan at the right moments, to time your collapses for maximum effect, spitting the laudanum into the fern so you do not poison yourself. It must be terribly tiring." Cedric's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to track: shock, calculation, and finally settling on wounded outrage. "Have you lost your mind? I am ill, Amelia. Desperately, perhaps fatally ill. How dare you suggest otherwise?" "Dr. Shaw told me the truth," she said, surprised by how steady her voice remained. "He has seen you, Cedric. He saw you eating. He saw you stretching. He knows you are not taking the medicine. He knows you are a healthy man playing a sick one." For just a moment, Cedric's mask slipped. She saw calculation flash across his features, saw him weighing options and discarding them, saw the cold intelligence that had orchestrated 9 years of manipulation. Then the mask reformed, and he was the wounded invalid again. "Shaw is a charlatan who has poisoned your mind against me," he declared. "He knows his treatments have failed, so he invents this fantasy to excuse his incompetence. And you, in your desperate need to escape your marital duties, grasp at his lies like a drowning woman clutching at driftwood." "The evidence is fabricated," Cedric interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "Can be misinterpreted, can be twisted to support whatever narrative that quack wishes to sell. I am shocked, Amelia, truly shocked that you would believe the word of a failed physician over the evidence of your own eyes." "The evidence of my own eyes," she repeated slowly, "is a man who groans in agony one moment and sits upright examining his fingernails the next, who claims to be too weak to rise yet pushes away soup bowls with considerable force, who suffers terribly in my presence but recovers miraculously the moment I leave the room." Cedric's face flushed with genuine anger now. "You have been spying on me, watching me when I believe myself in private? What kind of wife engages in such contemptible behavior?" "The kind who has been lied to for nearly a decade," Amelia said, her voice rising. "This is madness," Cedric sputtered. "You have clearly suffered a breakdown from the strain of caring for me." "I forgive you, Amelia. I understand that the burden has been heavy. But you must see sense. I am ill. I am dying. And I need you." There it was, the weapon he had wielded with such devastating effect for nearly a decade. The guilt, the obligation, the reminder that to doubt him was to be cruel, to question his suffering was to be the worst kind of wife. But the blade had lost its edge. "No," Amelia said quietly. "You are not ill, you are not dying, and you do not need me. You need an audience for your performance, a servant to control, a scapegoat for your own inadequacy. But I am done being any of those things." Cedric attempted to rise, his movements too swift and too coordinated for a man supposedly ravaged by illness. He caught himself, sinking back against the pillows, but Amelia had seen the truth of it. The agility, the strength, the perfect health masquerading as debilitation. "If you leave this room," Cedric said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, "if you abandon me now, you will regret it. I will make certain of that. I will ruin you. You will have nothing." "I'm sure you will try," Amelia replied. "But I find I no longer care about your threats any more than I care about your lies." She turned and walked to the door, each step feeling like breaking free from chains she had not realized she wore. Behind her, Cedric's voice rose in fury and desperation combined. "Amelia! Come back here at once! I am your husband! I command you!" She closed the door on his shouting and descended the stairs with purpose she had not felt in 9 years. Mrs. Daventry waited in the hallway below, and from the housekeeper's expression, she had heard at least some of the confrontation. "Mrs. Daventry," Amelia said, "please prepare the children's traveling trunks and pack my own belongings. We will be departing for Bath in the morning." "Yes, my lady," the housekeeper replied, and there was something that might have been approval in her tone. "Will you be requiring anything else?" "Writing materials," Amelia said. "I have a letter to compose." In the privacy of her own chambers, which she had not occupied in years, Amelia sat at her writing desk and began to write. Her hand shook only slightly as she formed the words that would sever the bonds of 9 years of manipulation. "My lord," she wrote, "I have learned the truth. Dr. Shaw has provided me with evidence of your deception. I spent 9 years sacrificing everything, my health, my friendships, my very self, believing I was caring for a dying man. I was actually serving a tyrant who turned my own virtue against me for his own gratification. I am leaving. The children are coming with me. Your performance has lost its audience. Amelia." She read it over once, then sealed it carefully. In the morning, she would leave it on his bedside table. By the time he read it, she would be gone. The night passed in a strange state between sleep and waking. Amelia heard Cedric calling for her several times, his voice carrying through the manor with increasing fury and decreasing pretense of weakness. She did not respond. Mrs. Daventry, bless her, must have taken it upon herself to attend to whatever the Baron required, because the shouts eventually subsided into sullen silence. At dawn, Amelia dressed in traveling clothes and went to wake her children. They stared at her with wide, confused eyes as she explained that they would be visiting Aunt Harriet for an extended stay. "Is Papa coming too?" James asked, his 10-year-old face uncertain. "No, darling, Papa must remain here." "Because he is sick?" Sophie contributed, though her tone suggested less certainty than the words implied. Edward, at 12, the eldest and most observant, met his mother's gaze directly. "Is he really sick, Mama? I have wondered for a long time." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes at her son's words. "No, Edward, he is not truly sick, and we will discuss everything once we are away from here. But for now, we must go quickly." The children dressed and gathered their things with an efficiency that suggested they had been waiting for this moment, even if they had not known it was coming. Miss Fletcher, the governess, requested permission to accompany them, having observed far too much over the years to wish to remain at Montfort Manor. The traveling carriage was loaded, the household staff assembled to see them off with expressions that ranged from concern to barely concealed satisfaction. Amelia made one final trip to Cedric's bedchamber, where she placed the sealed letter on his bedside table while he slept, or feigned sleep. She could no longer tell the difference, and no longer cared to. As the carriage pulled away from Montfort Manor, Amelia looked back only once. She saw a curtain twitch in the master bedchamber window and knew that Cedric was watching them leave. Let him watch. Let him rage. Let him summon her with that imperious voice that had once made her stomach clench with guilt. She would not be answering any more. The journey to Bath took most of the day, and by the time they arrived at Harriet's townhouse, Amelia felt as though she had traveled not just miles, but across some vast internal distance that separated who she had been from who she might become. Harriet opened the door herself, took one look at Amelia and the children and the loaded carriage, and simply held out her arms. Amelia walked into her sister's embrace and allowed herself finally to weep. "I know," Harriet murmured, holding her tightly. "I know, sister. You are safe now. You are all safe." The next weeks passed in a blur of activity that Amelia could scarcely process. Harriet's solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Griffiths, arrived the day after Amelia's flight and listened to her story with professional detachment that barely concealed his moral outrage. "Do you wish to pursue a legal separation, Lady Montfort?" "I do," Amelia said firmly, "on grounds of fraud, cruelty, and deception." "We will require a strategy," Griffith said thoughtfully, tapping his pen against the desk. "A court will not easily grant custody of children to a mother, regardless of the father's conduct, unless we can compel him to agree voluntarily. The law, unfortunately, favors the father's rights almost absolutely." "Dr. Shaw has agreed to testify," Amelia replied. "He has proof of fraud. If my husband attempts to reclaim the children or force my return, we will expose him. We will publish the truth of his malingering to every newspaper in London. He will be laughed out of society and likely imprisoned for fraud against his creditors, for he has claimed relief on debts due to illness." Mr. Griffith smiled thinly. "Blackmail, essentially, but a righteous one. It is an effective tool against a man who values his reputation above all else. We shall draft a deed of separation." Within a week, the documents had been drafted. Confronted with the threat of total public humiliation and potential criminal charges for financial fraud, Cedric signed. He had no choice. The alternative was a ruin so complete he would never recover. He granted Amelia custody and a generous settlement to avoid the scandal. Mr. Griffiths established a trust for Amelia, ensuring she had direct access to her funds without the need for a male intermediary, securing her independence in a way few women of her station enjoyed. In Bath, the children flourished with a rapidity that broke Amelia's heart even as it filled her with relief. Edward confessed one evening, in the quiet privacy of Harriet's drawing room, that he had always suspected his father was not truly as ill as he claimed. "Children see everything, Mama," he said with a wisdom beyond his years. "We notice when adults say one thing and do another. I saw Papa moving about his room when he thought no one was watching. I heard him laughing with his valet about some jest or other, his voice strong and clear. But then the moment you approached, he would become weak again." "Why did you never say anything?" Amelia asked gently. Edward looked down at his hands. "I was afraid that if I was wrong, I would be betraying Papa, and afraid that if I was right, it would hurt you too much to know." Amelia pulled her eldest son into an embrace. "You protected yourself, and that is always the right choice. I'm so sorry you had to carry that knowledge alone." Sophie and James, meanwhile, discovered what it meant to laugh freely, to run without being constantly hushed, to be children without the oppressive weight of their father's supposed suffering hanging over every moment. They bloomed in ways that Amelia had not realized they had been withering. Dr. Shaw visited Bath 3 weeks after Amelia's departure, ostensibly to provide additional medical documentation for the legal proceedings, but clearly also to assure himself of her welfare. "You look better," he said, when they met in Harriet's drawing room, chaperoned by propriety, but speaking with an ease that 9 years of clinical acquaintance had established. "More color in your cheeks, less shadow in your eyes." "I feel as though I have woken from a very long nightmare," Amelia admitted. "Though I confess the waking is its own sort of challenge. I am learning that I have no idea who I am apart from being Cedric's nurse." "Then you have the opportunity to discover it," Shaw said gently. "Many people go their entire lives without such a chance for reinvention." "How is he?" Amelia asked, then immediately wondered why she cared. Shaw's expression hardened. "Furious, isolated. The servants speak of his rages, but he dares not leave the manor for fear of what we might reveal. He is a prisoner of his own lies now." The neighbors have begun to talk, wondering why the invalid baron is suddenly rumored to be quite vigorous when the creditors come calling. "Good," Amelia said, surprising herself with the venom in her tone. "Let him live with the consequences of turning my own virtue against me. Let him understand what it means to be isolated and powerless." Shaw studied her for a long moment. I must confess something, Lady Montfort. My decision to reveal the truth to you was not motivated solely by medical ethics or moral principle. No? I have admired you for 9 years, he said quietly. Watched your strength, your resilience, your devotion, even when it was being so cruelly abused. I have wanted to see you free of that prison for longer than I can easily express, but I also understand that you have no reason to trust the motivations of men, given what your husband has done. So I want to be perfectly clear. I expect nothing from you. My testimony in your legal proceedings is offered without condition or expectation. If ever you wish to consider companionship that is based on partnership rather than manipulation, on mutual respect rather than control, I would be honored. But if you never wish to see me again after these proceedings conclude, I will accept that as your right and my penance for not speaking sooner. Amelia found herself touched by the frank honesty of his words. Dr. Shaw, Julian, he corrected gently, if you would permit it. Julian, she began again, testing the intimacy of his given name. I spent 9 years erasing myself to meet my husband's needs. I find I barely know who I am when I am not trying to anticipate and fulfill someone else's demands. I need time to discover myself before I can share that self with anyone else. A perfectly reasonable position, Julian said, and one I respect entirely. Whenever you are ready, if ever you are ready, I will still be here. The years that followed brought transformations Amelia could not have imagined in those first desperate days of freedom. She discovered that she was more than capable of managing her own finances, making her own decisions, forming her own opinions. The children thrived, growing into themselves without the weight of their father's manufactured suffering distorting their development. Edward went to Eton, where he distinguished himself in academics. Sophie revealed a talent for watercolors that had been suppressed during the years of enforced quiet at Montfort Manor. Young James discovered a love of music and began lessons on the pianoforte. Amelia herself began to write, small essays at first about women's legal rights and the ways in which the law failed to protect wives from the cruelties of controlling husbands. To her surprise, some of her pieces were published in progressive periodicals under a pseudonym. Then, growing bolder, she began to publish under her own name, accepting the mild scandal it created as a small price for having her voice heard. Julian remained a constant but patient presence in her life. He visited Bath regularly, always proper, always respectful of boundaries, gradually transforming from physician to friend to something more that neither of them rushed to define. 3 years after her departure from Montfort Manor, in the spring of 1825, Amelia received word that Cedric had fallen genuinely ill. The message came from Mrs. Daventry, who had remained at the manor out of loyalty to the estate rather than its master. The Baron is in agony, my lady. The doctors say it is an inflammation of the bowels, likely a rupture. He begs for you. He claims he is dying and wishes to beg your forgiveness before the end. Amelia sat with the letter for a long time, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction at his suffering, not grief for what they had once been to each other, just a blessed numbness that spoke of true detachment. Harriet found her in the drawing room, the letter still in her hands. What will you do? Nothing, Amelia said simply. He cried wolf too many times. For 9 years he complained of stomach pains that were lies. Now that he has a real pain, no one believed him until it was too late. It is a fitting end. He's asking for you on what might be his deathbed, Harriet said, though her tone suggested she was playing devil's advocate rather than genuinely arguing the point. He can ask, Amelia replied. I owe him nothing, not my time, not my forgiveness, not even my curiosity. I gave him 9 years of my life based on a lie. He gets nothing more from me. Nothing. And if he truly is dying? Amelia met her sister's gaze steadily. Then he will die as he lived, alone with his lies. I find I can accept that consequence quite peacefully. She wrote a brief reply to Mrs. Daventry. Please inform the Baron that I will not be coming. Whatever he wishes to say to me can remain unsaid. I have moved beyond the reach of his words. Sincerely, Lady Amelia Montfort. 2 weeks later, word came that Cedric had indeed died of a ruptured appendix and the resulting infection, a condition that could have been treated had his initial complaints not been dismissed by servants used to his lies. The illness had been real this time, a cruel irony that Amelia might have found darkly amusing if she had possessed the energy to care. She did not attend the funeral. She did not wear mourning. She simply continued with her life, which had become full in ways she had never imagined possible during those 9 years of imprisonment. The children, when told of their father's death, received the news with a somber quiet that spoke of complicated feelings they would need years to process. Edward asked if they were expected to grieve. "You feel whatever you honestly feel," Amelia told him. "Your father was a complex man who caused harm even as he was your father. Both things can be true simultaneously." It was Julian who attended Cedric's funeral, more out of professional obligation than personal sentiment. He reported back to Amelia later that it had been sparsely attended, that Cedric's final years of isolation and disgrace had left him with few mourners willing to honor his memory. "The servants said he spent his final weeks in genuine suffering," Julian told her. "They reported that he cried your name repeatedly, begging for you to come, insisting that you would forgive him if only you knew he was truly dying this time." "And did they believe him?" Amelia asked. "No," Julian admitted. They had seen too much of his previous performances to trust this one, even though it proved genuine in the end. That might be the truest consequence of his deception, that when he genuinely needed help, no one could believe him. "I find I feel no guilt about that," Amelia said, examining her own emotions with the same care she might examine an interesting specimen. "I thought I might, when the moment came. I thought the old training would resurface, that I would feel I should have been there. But I feel nothing except a kind of peaceful detachment." "Then his hold on you is truly broken," Julian observed. "It has been for some time," Amelia smiled, a genuine expression of contentment that had taken 3 years to cultivate. "I am not the same woman who fled Montfort Manor, Julian. I am not even the woman who married Cedric all those years ago. I have become someone entirely new, someone I quite like, actually." "As do I," Julian said quietly. "Amelia, I have waited 3 years as you requested. I have watched you grow into yourself, discover your own voice, build a life on your own terms. I have admired every moment of that transformation. Would you permit me now to formally express my affection and my hope that you might consider allowing me to court you?" Amelia considered the question seriously, taking her time with it in the way she had learned to take her time with all important decisions. Julian waited patiently, his expression hopeful but not demanding, his posture respectful of whatever answer she might give. "On one condition," she said finally, "that I will never be a nursemaid again. I require a partner who walks beside me, Julian, not a master who walks ahead or a patient who drags behind. I will never again subordinate my needs, my health, or my identity to someone else's demands." "I would want nothing less," Julian assured her. "I have watched you become whole, Amelia. I have no desire to diminish that wholeness. I wish only to walk beside it." They courted slowly, carefully, building a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. When they married, in a quiet ceremony 18 months later, it was a union of choice rather than obligation, of partnership rather than possession. Amelia continued to write, her essays growing more bold and more widely read. She became known in certain circles as an advocate for women's legal protections, speaking openly about her own experiences with a husband who had weaponized his supposed illness to control her completely. The children flourished. Edward went on to Oxford and then into law, specializing in family cases and women's rights. Sophie's watercolors gained recognition, and she eventually held exhibitions in Bath and London. James pursued music professionally, playing pianoforte in fashionable drawing rooms and eventually composing his own pieces. And Amelia, who had spent 9 years believing herself incompetent and inadequate, discovered that she was neither. She was capable, intelligent, resilient, and strong. She managed investments successfully, made decisions confidently, and built a life that reflected her own values and desires rather than someone else's manipulation. On the 10th anniversary of her departure from Montfort Manor, Amelia stood in the garden of the home she shared with Julian, watching her children gather for a celebration of her 50th birthday. They had all come: Edward with his new wife, Sophie with her latest painting to show her mother, James with a piece of music he had composed in her honor. Julian found her there, standing in the afternoon sunlight, a smile playing about her lips. "Any regrets?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist with the comfortable familiarity of years together. "Only that I did not discover the truth sooner," Amelia replied honestly. "I think of all the years I wasted believing his lies, all the time I could have spent becoming myself. But no, I do not regret leaving. That was the best decision I ever made. The decision to choose myself, to value my own well-being over someone else's manipulation. It saved my life in ways that have nothing to do with physical survival." "You saved yourself," Julian said gently. "I merely provided information, the courage to act on it, the strength to walk away, the determination to build something new. All of that was you." Amelia leaned into her husband's embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the uncomplicated affection that asked nothing of her except her presence. This was what love should feel like, she thought. Not a cage, not an obligation, not a constant test of devotion through suffering. Just this: two people choosing each other daily, supporting without smothering, loving without losing themselves. Inside the house, she could hear her children laughing, the sound free and bright and entirely unencumbered by the shadow of their father's manufactured suffering. They had grown up knowing the truth, understanding that compassion could be weaponized, that illness could be a tool of control, that walking away from abuse was not cruelty, but survival. That night, as the celebrations wound down and the family departed to their various homes, Amelia sat at her writing desk to begin work on her next essay. This one would be about the concept of obligation versus choice in marriage, about the way society's expectations could trap women in situations of escalating harm, about the courage required to choose oneself. She wrote until past midnight, her pen moving across the page with confident strokes, her thoughts flowing freely without the constant undercurrent of anxiety that had characterized so much of her earlier life. When she finally set down her pen and prepared for bed, she felt the deep satisfaction of work well done, of a life well lived, of a self fully claimed and thoroughly owned. Julian was already asleep when she slipped beneath the covers beside him. He stirred slightly, reaching for her hand in his sleep, and she laced her fingers through his, marveling at how different this touch felt from anything she had known before. There was no possession in it, no demand, no subtle test to see how much she would sacrifice before she broke. Just warmth, just companionship, just love. In the darkness, Amelia smiled and closed her eyes, falling asleep with the peace of someone who had walked through fire and emerged not destroyed, but forged into something stronger than she had ever imagined she could become. Cedric Montfort had tried to make her small, to reduce her to nothing more than a vessel for his control. He had failed. She had chosen herself instead, and in that choice had found not just survival, but triumph. The last thought before sleep claimed her was simple and profound. She was happy, genuinely, uncomplicated, thoroughly happy. And that happiness belonged entirely to her, built by her own hands, sustained by her own choices, protected by her own fierce determination never again to sacrifice herself for someone else's lies. It was, she thought, the best revenge of all. Thank you so much for journeying with us through Lady Amelia's story of courage and self-discovery. If this tale of resilience and choosing oneself over obligation touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue telling stories of strength, truth, and the transformative power of choosing oneself.